The journey has been long and tiring. You've walked through valleys of uncertainty, climbed mountains of challenges, and waited endlessly for a sign. There were days when the silence felt overwhelming, and you questioned everything. But every moment of waiting was not in vain. It was preparing you for something extraordinary. God saw your tears. He heard your silent prayers in the middle of the night. Every seed of hope you planted was being nurtured in the unseen. The waiting was never about the delay. It was about the preparation. The world may have seemed like it was against you, but every obstacle was teaching you resilience. Now the time has come. God says your waiting season is over. The clouds are parting, and the light is breaking through. All the pieces of your life are falling into place, just as they were meant to. The path grew darker as the figure ventured further, each step echoing in the vast emptiness of the night. The air was heavy with an otherworldly tension, as though the unseen realms were watching, waiting for something to unfold. Above, the stars dimmed, obscured by thick, swirling clouds that painted the sky with shades of deep crimson and black. In the distance, a faint glow pierced through the shadows, drawing the figure closer. As they approached, the glow revealed itself as an ancient altar carved from obsidian, its edges sharp and glistening like broken glass. Around it, swirling energies danced like flames, red and gold intertwined in a mesmerizing rhythm. Kneeling before the altar was a celestial being, not of this world. Their wings were vast, glowing with a fiery aura that seemed to burn yet illuminate the darkness. The being's face was obscured, a halo of crimson light hiding their features, but their presence radiated both power and sorrow. The figure hesitated, their breath shallow. The celestial turned, their voice resonating like thunder wrapped in silk. You've come far, but the journey has just begun. Do you accept the weight of what is to come? The figure nodded, and the celestial's wings spread wide, releasing a surge of energy that shook the ground and lit up the night. The darkness seemed to retreat, replaced by a burning sky filled with hope and fear in equal measure. The air seemed to hum with energy, a low vibration that resonated deep within the soul. The figure stepped forward cautiously, their shadow stretching long and distorted across the cracked ground. The celestial being stood silent now, their fiery wings gently folding in as if waiting for the moment to speak again. Behind the altar, the earth began to shift. The cracks widened, glowing with an intense golden-red light, and from within emerged towering spires of crystal, jagged and pulsating with energy. Each spire reflected the fiery glow of the angel's wings, creating an ethereal, mirrored labyrinth that seemed to stretch into infinity. The figure froze as the voice of the celestial being echoed again, softer this time but filled with gravity. Before you lies the mirror gate, the passage to the truth you seek. But beware. What you find will test not just your strength, but your soul. The figure glanced at their reflection in the crystalline spires. For a moment, it wasn't their own face staring back. It was something darker, distorted, a version of themselves that had succumbed to fear and despair. Shaking their head, they clenched their fists and stepped closer to the altar. The celestial extended a glowing hand toward the mirror gate. The crystals began to hum, vibrating in harmony with the energy in the air. Light erupted from the spires, forming a shimmering archway, blinding and magnificent. The figure took a deep breath, knowing that crossing the threshold meant facing the unknown and possibly their own downfall. As they stepped forward, the celestial's voice whispered, "Courage, chosen one. Only the worthy can endure the light." Dust swirled gently across the barren ground, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. The figure stood motionless, staring ahead at a massive stone gate that had emerged from the ground moments before. Its surface was adorned with glowing symbols, pulsating faintly like a heartbeat. Each pulse sent ripples through the stillness, breaking the oppressive silence of the wasteland. The figure stepped forward, boots crunching against the cracked earth. A low, resonant hum began to fill the space, growing louder with each step. As they approached, the symbols on the gate flared brighter, casting long shadows that danced across the desolation. A voice erupted from the void, deep and commanding. Beyond this gate lies the truth you seek. But truth demands sacrifice. Are you prepared to face what lies within? The figure hesitated, gripping the edge of their cloak tightly. Taking a deep breath, they reached out and touched the cold, glowing stone. The gate groaned as it slowly opened, releasing a flood of golden light that engulfed the land. When the brilliance subsided, they found themselves in a dense forest, where the air shimmered and the trees whispered ancient secrets. The forest was alive with an unnatural stillness. Every step the figure took caused the shimmering air to ripple, as though the fabric of the realm was reacting to their presence. The trees were ancient, their bark blackened as if scorched by fire, yet their leaves glowed faintly with hues of gold and silver. Shadows danced between the branches, moving independently of the dim, otherworldly light. From somewhere deep within the forest, a low, resonant hum began to echo. It wasn't just a sound. It was a feeling vibrating through the figure's chest. They followed the source of the hum, each step heavier than the last, as though the very ground resisted their journey. Ahead, a clearing emerged, bathed in a soft golden light. In its center stood a colossal tree, its roots twisting into the earth like the veins of a living being. Suspended from its branches was a glowing, crystalline orb, radiating power. As the figure stepped closer, the hum intensified, and a voice emanated from the orb. You have entered the realm of choices. What you take from here will shape the path ahead. But beware, the light reveals as much as it conceals. The figure paused, uncertain, as the orb pulsed, waiting for their decision. The glow of the crystalline orb pulsed rhythmically, casting long, flickering shadows across the clearing. The figure took another cautious step forward, their heart pounding in sync with the orb's hum. The forest seemed to close in behind them, its shimmering leaves dimming as though the trees themselves were watching, holding their breath. The voice returned, low and commanding. The power within this light is boundless, but it comes with a price. To wield it, you must surrender a part of yourself. What will you offer, seeker? The figure hesitated, their hand trembling as it hovered near the orb. Memories began to flood their mind. Moments of pain, triumph, and regret, all unraveling like threads in a tapestry. The orb seemed to draw these memories out, feeding on the emotions tied to them. As the figure's hand brushed the orb, a blinding surge of energy erupted, and the ground beneath them trembled. They fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the intensity of the light. Visions danced before their eyes, a towering city of gold, shadowed by an encroaching darkness. When the light faded, the orb spoke once more. You have chosen. What lies ahead will test your resolve. Be prepared. The forest was no longer the same. The figure stood amidst a transformed landscape, where the once glowing trees were now twisted and dark, their leaves scattered like ashes on the ground. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of burning wood and a faint metallic tang. The orb's light had dimmed, replaced by a faint, golden glow emanating from the figure's chest. They clutched their chest, feeling the energy within pulsate like a second heartbeat. The orb's voice echoed in their mind, softer now but filled with urgency. The light you carry is not yours alone. It binds you to the fate of this world. Protect it or all will be lost. Ahead, The forest opened into a vast valley shrouded in mist. In the distance, the silhouette of a grand, crumbling cathedral loomed, its spires reaching toward the sky like broken fingers. A faint, ominous glow pulsed from within its ruins, beckoning them forward. The figure stepped into the valley, each step echoing in the emptiness. Shadows began to stir at the edges of their vision, shifting and watching. The path ahead was uncertain, but there was no turning back now. The burden they carried demanded they press on. The valley's mist clung to the figure as they approached the crumbling cathedral. Each step felt heavier, as if the ground itself resisted their passage. The ominous glow from the cathedral's interior flickered, casting fleeting shadows across its broken walls and shattered spires. Crossing the threshold, the figure entered a grand, decaying hall. The air was suffused with a cold, unnatural energy. Massive stone statues of angels lined the walls, their faces eroded and wings cracked, as though they had witnessed centuries of suffering. At the center of the hall, a broken altar stood, surrounded by fragments of glowing runes etched into the floor. A shadowy figure emerged near the altar, cloaked in darkness and exuding a malevolent presence. Its voice was deep and grating, laced with mockery. "The light you carry is fragile, mortal. Do you believe it can stand against the weight of the shadows?" The figure steadied their resolve, the golden light in their chest growing brighter. The shadow hissed and recoiled slightly, but its grin remained. The battle between light and darkness was about to begin. The air inside the cathedral seemed to pulse with ancient power, heavy and oppressive. The shadowy figure circled the broken altar, its dark aura writhing like smoke caught in a storm. The figure tightened their grip on the light within, the golden glow spreading through their veins and emanating faintly from their eyes. "You walk into a graveyard of hope," the shadow sneered, its voice reverberating off the crumbling walls. "Those who carried the light before you failed. What makes you different?" The figure's voice, steady and calm, echoed through the hollow space. "I'm not here to prove anything to you." The ground trembled as the shadow lashed out, tendrils of darkness surging toward the figure. They raised their hand instinctively, the golden light exploding outward like a shield. The tendrils disintegrated on contact, leaving the shadow momentarily stunned. The figure took a step closer to the altar. The runes on the floor began to glow brighter, reacting to the growing intensity of the light within them. The shadow let out a guttural growl, retreating slightly but still poised to strike again. In the heart of the broken cathedral, the battle was no longer about survival, it was about transformation. The cathedral trembled as the shadow gathered its strength, its form expanding into a towering mass of darkness. The faint red glow from its core pulsated, sending ripples through the thick, oppressive air. The figure stood their ground, the golden light in their chest growing stronger, pushing back the encroaching void. "You underestimate the power of the light," the figure said, their voice steady but filled with determination. The shadow laughed, a deep, guttural sound that echoed through the cathedral. "And you underestimate the weight of despair." The glowing runes beneath the figure's feet flared brightly, as though answering an unspoken call. The light surged through the cracks in the stone, illuminating the cathedral walls with intricate patterns of gold and silver. The darkness recoiled, its edges hissing as they met the radiance. The figure raised their hands, channeling the light outward. It formed into a radiant spear that hovered in the air, pulsating with divine energy. With a determined gaze, they launched the spear toward the shadow. The impact was immediate. The shadow let out a deafening roar, fragments of its dark form scattering into the air. Yet even as it weakened, it began to reform, more furious than before. The battle was far from over. The air crackled with energy as the shadow reformed, swirling into a more monstrous shape. Its red core glowed fiercely, radiating waves of heat and malice. The figure stood unmoving, their golden light pulsating steadily, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding around them. The shadow lashed out with tendrils of darkness, faster and more vicious than before. The figure dodged, the golden glow trailing behind them like a comet. The cathedral groaned under the strain of their battle, its walls fracturing further with each clash of light and dark. "You cannot destroy me," the shadow bellowed. "I am the fear in every heart, the doubt in every soul." The figure's voice cut through the chaos, calm but resolute. "You are the darkness, but even the smallest light can pierce it." They raised their hands once more, summoning a dome of light that spread across the cathedral. The golden runes on the floor reacted, glowing so brightly that the shadow was forced to retreat into the corners of the hall. For the first time, the shadow hesitated. Its form flickered, its power waning. But this was no victory, merely a reprieve. Both light and darkness prepared for the next inevitable clash. Light receded, leaving the cathedral in an eerie stillness. Dust floated through the air, shimmering faintly in the aftermath of the clash. The shadow lingered in the farthest corners of the hall, its form flickering like a dying flame. "You believe this is over?" The shadow hissed, its voice softer now, almost a whisper. "Light always burns out. Darkness is eternal." The figure stepped forward, their golden light no longer a blazing force but a steady, calming glow. "Darkness may endure," they said, "but it cannot grow. Light, no matter how small, will always have the power to expand and overcome." The shadow writhed, its form shrinking further. But the ground began to quake, and the runes etched into the cathedral floor started to crack. The ancient power holding the place together was unraveling. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the hall, and the broken altar erupted into a beam of light and shadow entwined. The figure shielded their eyes as the two forces twisted together, creating a vortex in the center of the room. The shadow's laugh returned, stronger than before. "This isn't the end. It's just the beginning." Vortex of light and shadow spun violently, casting streaks of gold and black across the fractured cathedral walls. The figure stood firm, their golden light flickering but steady, their gaze fixed on the swirling chaos in the center of the hall. From within the vortex, whispers echoed, haunting voices of despair, anger, and longing. Suddenly, the shadow emerged again, larger and more menacing, now fused with the power of the vortex. Its form was no longer smoke but a solid, jagged mass, with glowing red cracks running across its body. The air around it shimmered with heat and malevolence. "You have unleashed what you cannot contain," the shadow roared, its voice booming with newfound power. The figure clenched their fists, the golden light from their chest flaring brighter. They stepped forward, planting their feet firmly on the cracked floor. The runes beneath them pulsed weakly but responded to their light, creating faint trails that spiraled toward the vortex. "Power without purpose is destruction," the figure said, their voice calm but unyielding. "And destruction will always consume itself." With those words, they raised their hands, summoning streams of light from the runes. The beams coiled around the vortex, tightening their grip as the cathedral groaned under the weight of the impending clash. Cathedral walls trembled as the clash of forces intensified. The vortex began pulling everything into its chaotic center. Broken pieces of stone, fragments of ancient statues, and even the dust in the air swirled violently. The figures stood firm, their golden light now a beacon against the encroaching darkness. The shadow, now solid and colossal, advanced slowly, each step shaking the ground. Its voice was a guttural rumble, laced with venom. Your light is fragile. It flickers. It falters. You are no match for the eternal void. The figure didn't waver. Instead, they took a deep breath, their golden glow surging outward, momentarily halting the pull of the vortex. They extended both hands, channeling energy from the crumbling ruins beneath their feet. The void may be vast, the figure said, their voice echoing through the cathedral. But even the smallest spark can set the darkness ablaze. Golden light shot from their hands, forming chains that wrapped around the vortex. The runes responded, glowing brighter as they fed the light. The shadow roared in fury, its red cracks glowing brighter as it fought to break free. For a moment it seemed like the light might prevail. But the vortex began to expand, pushing back with a force that threatened to engulf everything. Cathedral's foundations groaned under the immense pressure as the vortex's pull intensified. Shards of stained glass from the shattered windows spun through the air, catching glimmers of the golden and shadowy light. The figure's chains of golden energy strained against the vortex's force, flickering as though on the verge of breaking. The shadow advanced further, its red cracks pulsating with fiery intensity. Each step it took left scorch marks on the crumbling floor. You fight a futile battle, it sneered. Every moment you resist, you only delay the inevitable. Surrender and the pain will end. The figure tightened their grip, the golden glow from their chest growing brighter. Pain is temporary. Purpose endures, they replied. Their voice was steady, but their body trembled under the strain. Summoning their remaining strength, the figure raised one hand toward the vortex and the other toward the shadow. Streams of light erupted from both palms, splitting into radiant tendrils that sought to bind their enemies. The vortex buckled, and the shadow let out a piercing roar as the light latched onto it. But the strain was overwhelming. The ground beneath the figure cracked, and the light began to dim. This wasn't the end of the battle, but the cost of holding on was growing. The cathedral was on the brink of collapse, its ancient walls splintered and groaning under the weight of the swirling chaos. The vortex swelled, drawing everything into its dark core, while the shadow grew more monstrous, feeding off the destruction. The figure, now kneeling on the fractured ground, gritted their teeth as the golden light from their chest flickered like a dying ember. The chains of light began to weaken, threatening to shatter. Yet, even in the face of overwhelming odds, their resolve remained unbroken. With one final, desperate breath, the figure whispered, "If the light within me dies, let it ignite in others." The golden glow surged one last time, not as a beam of power but as an explosion of pure, radiant energy. The light filled the cathedral, bursting through its shattered windows and illuminating the stormy skies beyond. The shadow screamed, its form unraveling and scattering into the vortex, which began to collapse inward. As the chaos subsided, the cathedral stood in ruins, bathed in a soft golden glow. The figure lay still, their light now gone, but not extinguished. From the rubble, faint golden embers rose into the air, carried by the wind, a reminder that hope endures, even in darkness.